Chapter 9 is titled Integrated Response to Learning, and in this chapter it talks a lot about what we need to do as teachers to respond to students and their learning, and to make sure that every student is learning. And a lot of times what teachers do is we worry so much about the time constraint or making sure we're following the pacing guide. What we tend to do is teach the middle kid. So then we leave out two huge groups. We leave out the lower achieving group and the higher achieving group. What I really love about this chapter is that there's this figure 9. The visual shows both sides there, and that they're both titled intervention. And so often when we think of intervention, we think of the lower achieving groups, that we need to intervene and that we need to do something. But it's so true that the higher achieving group, in order to show growth, in order for them to learn, they also need intervention. So what I like about this chapter is that it gives you 8 examples of how it is done well and how you can respond to learning. And so this first example that we have here is called the integrated response, and it's at the elementary level. So what they have in the book is a 4th grade group. The teachers look at the pacing guide and they decide on what standards they're all going to teach the entire week at the same time. And so it's Monday through Thursday that they work on it. And then on Thursdays, they give a short assessment, like 5 problems that really focus on the skills that they were teaching that week. But they sort the kids out by the number of missed problems. And then on Fridays, they do a differentiated instruction where the kids who either got them all correct or maybe missed one would be doing an enrichment activity. The ones who were about the middle ground would then get a chance to review the ones that they got wrong. It could be a check your understanding activity, a review of some sort. And then the lowest kids would get an intervention where they would go back and be retaught in a new way, so that way it actually was retained and that they learned it. So this works really, really well at elementary level because you're able to kind of work around each other's schedules and work together and truly be one. The next example that our book gives for response to learning is called the school-wide response. And again, this example is at an elementary level. And so what it is they start with data that they take from short cycle checks that then gives them groups of students that they have twice a week intervention. And so there's 3 groups that are formed from this data. They have the intervention, the review, and the enrichment. And so then each grade level will then take that data and decide which area has the greatest need based off of the data. And they will, during that twice a week intervention time, work with those students on what they need most. So this next example that the book gives is called the expanded team model. And I know some of you are probably like, well, it would be great to be able to do all of that, but we only have 3 teachers on our team. We can't divide. An intervention group can't be 30 kids. Well, this expanded team model addresses that issue. So in order to be able to meet the needs of all of the students is that we need to change the ratio. So in order to do a true intervention, we've got to get some other people involved. So that's what it means by the expanded team model. We will be including specialists, assistants, special educators, gifted and enrichment teachers, ELL, Title I, so on, whatever support your building might have during this time. And so it allows for the groups to have appropriate numbers. And the book gives us that group 1, which would be our most intensive, would be like 3 to 1. And then our next intensive group would be 7 to 1. Group 3 would be our less intensive, so we're getting to closer to grade level, would be about 12 to 1. Your group 4, which is grade level, 15 to 1, and that would be like the review section of it. Your advanced group could be 35 to 1, and that would be enrichment teachers and things like that, pushing these kids on. So having an expanded team model allows us to have smaller groups to be more specific, more focused, and more intentional. The next example that the book gives is called the prevention approach. It's on page 192, and they give an example of a kindergarten class. And so the kindergarten class does a daily reading instruction, and on top of the daily reading instruction is they do twice a week, they have small group reading instruction. And so the team that they do is they have a reading specialist and they have 2 reading assistants. So the 3 of them make small groups, and in these small groups they focus on the skills that they truly need. So one group could be working on guided reading instruction, other group could be working on their ABCs. And so what they're doing is this school has set an expectation that by the end of kindergarten that everyone is reading and or ready to read. Our next example of a response to learning that our book gives is called an intervention, prevention, and acceleration model. This model is very similar to the previous one, that they take the common formative assessments that they take, and they use that data and form groups from it. And these groups of students get additional instruction on top of their normal instruction, but they get additional instruction 4 days a week. And it's usually about 30 minutes of learning. It's very intensive. It's exactly what they need. A lot of times if they're in the enrichment group, they get to pick the topic that they're wanting to do. And with the middle group, it's review. And then the lower group, it is definitely intensive. It is to remediate, it is to prevent, it is to hopefully accelerate their learning. And then on the fifth day, one thing that this example gave in the book, the fifth day they use it for planning, reviewing, and refocusing, taking the data and figuring out how to move forward with this group. The sixth example that the book gives on page 193 is called the Pre-Assessment for Early Warning System. I really like that it's called an early warning system, and I love how the book here talks about that pre-assessment is their main tool. And so it uses the data from pre-assessments to drive the instruction, and not just the intervention. It drives the instruction, and it kind of helps the teacher discover which students will need the support, and as the book says, before they have a chance to fail. During the additional instructional support, they can figure out what way to best meet the students before they get to the Our next example is the middle school school-wide response. And in the text, we see a middle school that they take the data from common assessments and they use that data to drive the groups. And during a 30-minute period, the students all are given direct instruction where they need the most support. So the students who get enrichment, they get a chance to have a say in the topic that they want to learn, whereas others who might need a little bit more support would be assigned into like a resource room for small group, and maybe it's review, maybe it's just more time to work on something. And then we have the intervention group, where it is much more direct, much more intentional, and they receive the support that they need to make sure that they are closing the gap. Our last example is for a high school model, and it's the acceleration, intervention, and prevention. And these are kind of like a mixture of all of them together, but it is definitely geared towards high school. The way that the example in the book talks about is that this high school monitors the students by giving them progress reports every 3 weeks and then report cards on the 6th week. And what it does is it allows the students to see their progress. And what they do is, if a student is in danger of failing or getting behind, they give them a lot of extra support. It's unlimited support. So there's tutoring, mentors, study hall, one-on-one specialists. And I mentioned the mentor, but I love this, that the freshmen who are showing signs of not being where they need to, being accelerated and moving forward, that they are given a upperclassman mentor who walks through them with things and kind of checks up on them, so it's not just from the teachers. And the example in the text, that this school doesn't do remedial classes. It's all accelerated. It's all college preparatory classes. So that's really cool that they set the standard high and that the students are expected to get there, and they will get them there. So the epilogue of this book is titled A New Era of Spectacular Teachers. Dr. Rannells, the author of this epilogue, even says that teachers nowadays are wearing more hats than they used to. And she says that teachers are going above and beyond to become spectacular. She gives us 7 things that these spectacular teachers do and that they do well. The first thing that she talks about that spectacular teachers do is that they build trusting relationships. Now, obviously, we build trusting relationships with students, but what she's talking about here is actually between teacher and the administration, that there needs to be a common trust, that there's a safe place, that administration can come in and be honest and give good feedback, and that teachers as well can be accepting of that feedback, and that they know that I've got your back and you've got mine, and this isn't I got you, it's I got you. The next point she talks about is getting to know the students. She gives a really good example of how on the first day this one middle school teacher goes around and does the typical what is your name, things like that, and by the end of class he has literally learned every single student's name. Now I don't have that ability, but this is what I like to know, like what I like to call the non-contingent attention, and this is where you get to know the students as students and not just data points. The third way to be a spectacular teacher is to solicit students' perspectives, and there's an example she gives in the book here where students feel like they are heard, that they are valued, and that they are part of the decisions being made. And I love this example. I'm going to probably steal it. Is that instead of just saying here's my rules, here's my expectations, this one teacher says, has them fill out a 4-part chart, and it says, my job is, my job isn't, and then down below, your job is, your job isn't, and it allows for everyone to have ownership over what the classroom will look. The next thing that spectacular teachers do is that they provide structures. They have procedures, they have routines, they have expectations, and they practice them. In the book, a kindergarten teacher demonstrated the appropriate behaviors and inappropriate behaviors, and then she had them practice the daily routines and procedures. I often hear people say practice makes perfect, but I don't think it is practice makes perfect because that's unrealistic. But I like to say practice makes permanent. Spectacular teachers also engage students in the learning process. In the book, she says that she's teaching the kids how we teach and letting the students know our secrets, and it really does help them. It kind of sees where they're supposed to go, and it helps them understand our process better. Spectacular teachers show respect and interest. You need to show students respect, forgiveness, humility, apologize, be honest, ask for forgiveness, show them that we are humans just like them, and that respect will be reciprocated. A point that she makes in here, I 100% agree with, is that the greatest challenge continues to be the fight against student apathy. A simple way to combat this, and it's show up. And I agree. Be there for the students outside of school. Go to games, go to recitals, go to concerts. Show the students that you care. When they see that, they'll care. The last example of a spectacular teacher is that we need to collaborate. We are not alone in this. On page 207, it says, we row as one. As a school, we need to be a complete unit. We need to collaborate with each other. Also, not only collaborate with staff, but we also need to collaborate with students. And that way, it can empower them, show them ownership, show them that we are a team and we are in this together.